Alright, frameworks and pre-process. Oh. At this point, you have written quite a bit of vanilla HTML and CSS and learned many design techniques. That you will continue to use as you grow as a developer throughout your Alright. Throughout your experience, you may have come across information on CSS frameworks and preprocessor, aka precompilers, but these types of tools can make writing CSS more streamlined and less tedious. A useful reason to be aware about CSS frameworks and preprocessors is that they are commonly found in the workplace. The rain is in my eye. We'll do this later. It's useful to be aware about CSS frameworks and preprocessors that they are commonly found in the workplace. I think I already read this. Wait. How do you go back? Alright, maybe I didn't go over this. How do you uncomplete? You should be aware that at this point in your learning is about to CSS and pilot database access. And learn one during this course will not be as productive or valuable in the long run as improving your fundamental CSS skills. Alright, let's explain the general overview of topics that you will learn in this lesson. What a CSS framework is, some of the available frameworks. Preprocessor is mail processors. Different frameworks have different goals. Frameworks like Bootstrap do a lot of the heavy lifting of packaging out commonly used CSS code for you. Even icons and interactions like menu dropdowns, they are designed to abstract away the process of coding intuitive, reusable, and responsive elements. Things like Tailwind aim to change how we apply CSS through a different syntax by supplying pre-named classes that typically only apply a single line of CSS each. CSS framework is ultimately just a bunch of CSS that you can use and access using the class defined by the framework. For example, many frameworks provide a class called .button that will add all the needed styles to your buttons without you having to write any CSS. In general, to use a framework, you will need to understand how it expects you to structure your website and which classes it uses to apply its specific set of styles. You should be aware that there are quite a few frameworks available. Two other frameworks you may come across are Bulma and Foundation, but there are many more out there. Frameworks are great for rapidly producing sites with interfaces that end users can easily interact with. However, once you've taken a tour through some of the more popular frameworks, you'll start noticing an awful lot of similarities between a lot of sites you encounter due to similar use of frameworks. In addition to that issue, too many new developers also jump into learning frameworks too early in their education. The prospect of not having to practice writing manual CSS is very tempting. As a result, many developers do not get enough CSS practice under their belts to solidify the fundamentals of this very important language. Additionally, the process of overriding a framework's style or debugging style issues on your page becomes very difficult if you have weaker CSS fundamentals. It is imperative to understand what a framework is doing under the hood so that you are equipped to handle these issues later, and trust us, you will have to. Ultimately, frameworks can help you get up and run quickly, but they can constrain you in the long run. Once you've started a project using a framework, it can be difficult to remove it. In the future, you or your employer may have to decide whether or not to use a framework for a project, and if so, which one. Got it. Preprocessors, aka precompilers, are languages that help you write CSS more easily. They can reduce code repetition and provide all sorts of time-saving and code-saving features. For example, by allowing you to write loops and conditionals and join multiple style sheets. Preprocessors. Wow, okay. Loops and conditionals and multiple style sheets. CSS preprocessors are essentially extensions to vanilla CSS to provide some extra functionality. When you run the preprocessor, it takes your code and turns it into vanilla CSS that you can import into your project. So it might not be worth the overhead of learning one unless you think you really need these features. For example, hello, oh gosh, it's been using Alright, hello? Oh gosh. I've been using the wrong microphone. That sounded awful, I'm sure. Preprocessors do have some unique and helpful tools, but many of their most helpful features and it's just not worth it. For example, you might have already learned about custom properties, which used to be something only possible with preprocessors. CSS nesting also used to be common if you have some preprocessor wait. More about support. SAS lesson stylus. Gotcha. Read this brief overview of CSS frameworks. Will do. What is a CSS framework? Bootstrap, Tailwind, CSS, Materialize, and more. CSS frameworks are tools used by UI developers to make their job easier. Rather than reinventing the wheel each time a new project comes up, frameworks give developers the tools to quickly spin up user interfaces that can be tweaked and iterated on throughout a project instead of spending time starting from a blank document. They're also useful in large teams and help those of us that need to create a theme for use in more than one project. Oftentimes, however, CSS frameworks for websites are a little ambiguous to complete beginners, filled with buzzwords and descriptions that only more senior developers will catch on to. It is difficult for beginners to tell when and which frameworks they should start learning. In its simplest forms, a CSS framework is a collection of style sheets that are prepped and ready to use. They're tailored for use in common situations like setting up nav bars, and are often expanded upon by other technologies such as SAS and JavaScript. Think of it like a colleague giving you a completed CSS style sheet for a home page you're setting up. Basically, all you need to do is write up your HTML with the appropriate structure, classes, and IDs, and you're off to the races. However, instead of that style sheet being specifically for the homepage you're working on, it's ready to accommodate a general standard of homepage, having classes for things commonly found throughout other homepages, i.e., navbar, footer, slider, hamburger menu, 3-column layout, etc. It doesn't say etc., but you can say that. This allows you to quickly set up web pages without having to deep dive into some CSS, saving a bunch of time. Time savings aren't the only benefit gained by using CSS frameworks. Teams with multiple developers, especially larger ones, can really appreciate the standards that frameworks bring to the table. Instead of each developer bringing their own flavor of class names to a project, frameworks standardize layouts and allow one developer to easily read another developer's code. This saves time, so also allows for a smoother development cycle with less bugs and easier team communication. If you've ever been thrown into the deep end of a nearly complete project and told to fix up the UI, you know the pain that framework can alleviate. I don't. Never been in that situation. Penny Lane is in my ears and in my eyes. Ba-dum, da-dum. It is important to remember that jumping right into a framework as a newbie isn't recommended. Sometimes folks just want to get started as quickly as they can, and they see frameworks as a way to jumpstart their goals. While that's true for spinning up projects, it can be harmful to your long-term career as you'd be missing out on learning the basic skills that can be applied across the board. For example, by learning CSS in its pure form first, you can easily search a framework's documentation for how to do most of the things you were doing with pure CSS. It also allows you to easily identify issues with your syntax that can lead to easier customizations when you need to tweak the framework you're using. On the flip side, if you jump right into something like Bootstrap, you'd be setting yourself up for learning Bootstrap's way of laying things out and how they structure their classes. While you'd be insanely fast at spinning up a UI in Bootstrap, using pure CSS or even another framework will often stump you, and you won't have that pure CSS knowledge to help you solve and troubleshoot. To be clear, this is my opinion on the matter. Many UI developers have started using frameworks straight away and were able to expand their skills beyond the ones I started with. That makes sense. That being said, for the general population and for myself, fundamentals. Pure CSS, vanilla CSS. If you think you're ready to start using a CSS framework, there are a lot out there to choose from. Having usually a few myself with varying degrees of experience, I can tell you that they're extremely useful. This is especially true if you choose the right one for your given use case. In my next piece, I'll be writing, overview of Sass, Less, and Stylus. What is a CSS preprocessor? Syntactically awesome style sheets. Sass is written in Ruby. A precompiler, libsass, allows Sass to be parsed in other languages and decouple it from Ruby. So Sass is based on indentation. Sassy CSS is not. So Sassy CSS resembles native or vanilla CSS, and it gives all the power, whereas Sass is more difficult to read. Semicolons, yep. Then brackets. Arguably the most popular front-end framework, Bootstrap. I disagree. I've heard more about Tailwind. It is written in Sass. Up until version 3, Bootstrap was written in Less, but Bootstrap 4 adapted Sass and boosted its popularity after. A few of the big companies using Sass are Zapier, Uber, Airbnb, and Kickstarter. I have no idea what this is. Right. Leaner style sheets. It was written by Alex Sellier. Here's the original Sass. npm or incorporating less.js file. BRB. The popular Indiegogo, Patreon, and WeChat. Okay, I've heard of 2 of those. TJ Holloway Chuck.
Front gates. Some player really like the way Q when he gets into that stride and.
Toquezinho do Luiz Araújo. Se arma o Flamengo.
Brasi. What am I doing? Focus. Sorry, Gage. So it is indentation based. Style. Interesting. Coursera is the only one I've heard of. Interesting. Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA. All right. CSS preprocessors have many advantages, but like most tools, they also have a number of drawbacks, which I'll describe here. Debugging is more difficult. All right, understood. Now it's complete. Almost 30 minutes of work. I'd say maybe 25 of it was work. Forms grid. And then I'll be in JavaScript. Oh my gosh, that's gonna take a year. To start collecting user data, we need to use control elements. What is it for? Method. We're gonna do input type equals text, and then ID first name. Then we're gonna do a label for first name. I see. Interesting. Very cool. The name attribute serves as a reference to the data inputted into a form control. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. You never give me your life. You won't give me your life. Yep. That I think that wraps it up for today. We will continue